Namaste, beloveds. This is Valerie Ames, Mother with Wisdom, Ocean 9. And I just finished the first video, Self Mastery, Existing as I Am. And I I decided to do this as a second video rather than making the other one so very, very long. It's already, I think, like an hour or so. Um, this is This book is Stuart Wilde. He's also the best-selling author of Whispering Winds of Change. And this book is called The Infinite Self, 33 Steps to Reclaiming Your Inner Power. And this is very fitting. This is step 7. All human knowledge is affected by human weakness. And it goes hand in hand with um, the video that I just did, Self Mastery, Existing as I Am. And I'm just going to read it. Weakness is endemic to our human situation. Most of the weaknesses are various manifestations of the ego's fear of death. I'm going to talk about death later on, but this idea of sustaining, saving, holding on, restricting, being careful, not taking any risks, comes from the ego's fear and uneasiness because it's unsure that things will last or what will happen next. It's part of our mortality. We have we have all those weaknesses inside us, not just the fear that the ego experiences, but also the emotional self-indulging self-indulgence it puts us through. Please listen carefully, and if you need to, rewind, and I suggest that you get this book because it will help you in 2021 immensely. It is a must read for 2021. Um, Maybe I will see about doing a book club for it. Um, I became familiar with it because I was in um, a book group for it. So that's how I came upon it. And upon reading it and rereading it, and here I am again. So I gave birth to it in so many different forms, and now I'm presenting it. So here we go. One of the things that will start to bug you as you trot along the spiritual path is the enormous self indulgence we all labor under. The ego is grim when it comes to indulging itself in silliness. It tells itself terrible lies. It constantly seeks to make itself important. It wants nothing for nothing. It wants things for nothing. It wants reassurance. It needs attention. It is always seeking to gratify itself. If, beloveds, if ever you need an example, a living example of what ego is, 45, President Donald Trump is a perfect example of the ego manifested and come to life. Just as Jesus Christ is the perfect example of conscious awareness and compassion and wisdom come to life, manifesting. Polar opposites, okay? One child of wisdom who has mastered his ego, the other child of wisdom whose ego has mastered him. Okay. It's not surprising that we welcome victims of the ego. Oops, okay, I skipped some. Hmm. We we have all those weaknesses inside of us, not just the fear that the ego experiences, but also the emotional self-indulgence it puts us through. One of the things that will start to bug you as you trot along the spiritual path is the enormous self indulgence we all labor under. The ego is grim when it comes to indulging itself in silliness. It tells itself terrible lies. It constantly seeks to make itself important. It wants nothing. It wants things for nothing. It wants reassurance. It needs attention. It is always seeking to gratify itself. It's not surprising that we become victim of the ego. The ego feels insecure, so it's constantly trying to ameliorate the insecurity, looking for experiences or things that will make it feel better. But everything you do to help the ego, to keep the ego happy, only serves as temporary respite. You can't control the ego by keeping it happy. You can only win back control of your life via discipline and going beyond the ego's inherent weakness. And of course, a lot of that weakness comes from the ego's sense of not knowing, which causes a terrible disquiet. However, as you embrace the spiritual path, you'll understand that you're in the flow. You're only going to see a few yards in front of you. Everything becomes beautifully spontaneous. Nothing is laid out in little rows anymore. So, one of the ideas to remember is that the need to feel secure is only a bad habit. You can feel secure even when you don't know what will happen next. It's only a custom of ego that requires you to need to know. You don't. When you become more infinite in your perception, you become more open, and knowing what will happen next becomes less important. It's the difference between flow and restriction. You can be quite secure even when you don't know. When people say to you, "What do you know?" you can say nothing. I don't know, don't care. Then you transcend the weakness of the ego so that it is reluctant to move. You're going to have to move without knowing, just feeling your way along and asking yourself constantly, "Hey, how does this feel? Does it feel right?" If it doesn't, make adjustments. When you can come to don't know, don't care, you're free. Instantly, you go past one of the great human weaknesses, the need to know. If you're balanced today, you'll be more balanced tomorrow because your energy is rising constantly. If you're abundant today, you'll be more abundant tomorrow because that is how energy works, how rising energy works. Once you comprehend the nature of the weakness of this existence, it becomes a huge triumph and a great thrill to go beyond that weakness. In the end, that's what this journey is all about. In my view, self indulgence is one of the major weaknesses we have to contend with. It blocks our spiritual development. It's arrogant. The idea that somebody owes you a living, somebody owes you importance, somebody owes you respect, somebody owes you an opportunity, it's silly. To become an infinite being, you're going to have to be self sufficient. So, if you believe that somebody out there is going to provide for you, you can't dominate your journey through this physical plane. You have to prove your mastery of this physical dimension by generating enough energy to sustain yourself. If you can't earn loads of money now, begin by reducing your needs, saying, "I've got to have this, I've got to have that." Is self indulgent and destructive because it affirms your lack. What you ought to say instead is, "I have less money, so I'm going to consume less. Maybe I'll live in a cheaper dwelling, get a cheaper car, eat less." Excuse me, being vain. Let me pause for just a moment and adjust some things. Okay, beloveds. Let's see, where was I? I'll restart back at you have to prove your self mystery of this physical dimension by generating enough energy to sustain yourself. If you can't earn loads of money now, begin by reducing your needs. Saying, I've got to have this, I've got to have that, is self-indulgent and destructive because it affirms your lack. What you ought to say instead is, I have less money, so I'm going to consume less. Maybe I'll live in a cheaper dwelling, get a cheaper car, eat less, spend less money on beer. People naturally think that the way to resolve their money problem is to earn more money. Of course, that helps, but the real answer lies in discipline and balance. If your ego is out of control at, say, the level of 1,000 per month, you'll be in even more trouble at 2,000 a month. And if you suddenly earn 10,000 and you had the same lack of discipline, you'll soon be in serious financial trouble. In fact, the more you earn, the more trouble you'll get yourself into. So the infinite self protects you from your own imbalance. It makes quite sure you don't get yourself into too much trouble by earning too much money. The way to expand your wealth and get on top of things is to cut out the non-vital ego expenses and to discipline yourself to stay inside whatever money you do have. I've talked a lot about the metaphysics of money elsewhere in my writing, but the main secret to abundance comes from the emotional balance and stability you project when you are in control. If you are harassed or worried about money, the insecurities you emit goes out to others as an insecure subliminal signal. It destroys your ability to earn more. The secret to having enormous amounts of wealth is to not need it. Then it comes to you naturally. When you are desperate and you are trying to force things to happen, money hops up the road in front of you, tantalizing just out of reach most of the time. So the trick is to spend less than you earn. Then you make more and more money and get as rich as you like, and you'll never have problems. In addition, I think it's important to remember that on the spiritual path there are no guarantees. It's futile to seek one. The only exception is energy. If you have energy, that's your guarantee. If you don't have energy, you'll become imbalanced and things will start coming at you. Simple, really. For self-indulgence comes self-importance. Don't get into status trips where you are in the pecking order. Who's up and who's down? Who's hip and who isn't? Who's spiritual and who isn't spiritual? All of that is just snobbery. When you look at our world full of conceit, pomposity, and arrogance, everyone jostling, posing, seeking attention, all that Hollywood glamour stuff, it's grim. It's a lot of weakness and hype, seeking to be heard, competing to promote itself, desperate to make itself special. The Tao says, to be always talking is against nature. He who boasts of what he will do succeeds in nothing. That is why he that possesses Tao does not linger, because the initiate is strong. He or she doesn't care to linger around, waiting for praise or attention. These people don't need to be considered special. The initiate is happy to stand at the back, to take the lowest place, to be silent. The Taoists revered water because they saw it as a symbol of humility and service. Water nurtures and sustains all living things, and yet it seeks nothing for itself. It always flows to the lowest spot. So, be like water. Be humble. Nurture yourself and others, and stay at the back where you are free to slip in and out of life situations unnoticed and unencumbered. That is the watercourse way. You don't need razzmatazz and glamour. That only serves to create emotional weight in your life, pumps the ego into a false sense of importance. Too much hype and attention, and the ego becomes a spoiled brat and impossible to control. Again, Donald Trump. It will soon drag you away from the Tao, from what is natural and good. The Republican Party. Trash that nonsense before it makes you sick. You don't need it. All you need is balance and the contentment, creativity, love, and comprehension that flows from that. And from these beautiful things, you will understand your spiritual place. And from that flows silent power, gratitude, and sacredness. These are the real things. Everything else is Maya, hype, and BS. It won't last. What people yearn for makes them weak. When you fall in love and yearn for another person, the very fact that you are desperate for him or her weakens you. It often means you can't have this person. Your stifling need makes the other person uncomfortable and they back away. When you yearn for a particular goal in life, leaning toward it emotionally, pushing for it, you affirm that you don't have it. Thus, you push the very thing you want away from you. So control that yearning. Say, hey, I'd like to have a new car, but I can't afford it at this time. I feel abundant. I feel the car is becoming a part of my life. I'll get it later. Or perhaps something even better will come along. Then work in a concentrated way toward materializing your goal. Don't yearn, don't moan. Take a moment each day before you go to sleep or before you rise in the morning to give thanks for what you do have. This life is beautiful. These children are beautiful. This home isn't so great, but thank you, Great Spirit, for providing the shelter. Thank you for these clothes and these friendships. Thank you for these economic opportunities. The other human weakness is guilt. Guilt is self indulgence that comes from remorse, and it has been successfully used by society as a control mechanism. If you don't follow along, people judge you as a rotten person. The fact is, most of the things you feel guilty about are just rules other people created. In the eternal Tao, there are no ups and downs. There is no good and evil. There is high energy that sets people free and expresses love. And there's low energy that restricts, controls, and manipulates people. But it is only energy. Excuse me one moment. Okay, I had to plug up my battery. um, Let me see. Get back to where I was. The other human weakness is guilt. Guilt is self-indulgence that comes from remorse, and it has been successfully used by society as a control mechanism. If you don't follow along, people judge you as a rotten person. The fact is, most of the things you might feel guilty about are just rules other people created. In the Tao, in the eternal Tao, there are no ups and downs. There is no good and evil. There is high energy that sets people free and expresses love. And there's low energy that restricts, controls, and manipulates people. But it is only energy. There is no absolute and no judgments in the grace of the infinite self. I don't believe in the strict metaphysical sense that there are any completely innocent victims. If you put out thought forms of restrictions, weakness, manipulation, and lack, you pull to you negative experiences. In the totality of an infinite perception, the victim and the aggressor are one and the same energy. If you have done something wrong to somebody, yes, you could have chosen a more righteous way of acting. But on the other hand, they put out negative energy and as a result pulled you into their life. You mess them up at your own time and expense. They can say, thank you, God, for sending me a teacher who has messed me up and infringed upon me. It taught me things. Guilt is a worthless energy. If you've messed up or failed, grant yourself absolution. Then draw a line in the sand and say, from now on, I'm going to act in a better way. I'm going to act in a more honorable way. Excuse me. The important thing is to truncate the emotion of that guilt before it becomes overwhelming. Forgive yourself and realize that in the eternal spiritual sense, there isn't any real sin. There is only forgiveness. Yes, there are low energy actions that infringe and restrict, and there are high energy actions that love, liberate, inspire, and release people. But that's all there is. We come to experience both types of action in this lifetime. Naturally, as a spiritual person working on yourself, you're going to try to choose as many high energy liberating attitudes and actions as you can. But if sometimes you go the other way and fail, you haven't really failed. All you've done is gone up the other end of the scale. You have to understand contrast in order to learn. Bit by bit, you will strengthen, become more, and learn a better way. Sometimes you have to fall apart or do something that is really infringing on others because that's what you needed at that time, and that's what you did. So you can absolve yourself and move on. The other weakness that affects people is a poor self image, which invariably comes from childhood experiences and the parenting you received. Everything is flexible. You can work on self-image without necessary healing all your inner child wounds. If you will concentrate and love yourself, and if you will set aside quiet time and do inner work, acknowledging yourself for the things you have achieved. If you try to improve yourself and raise your energy, exercise more, and become more organized bit by bit, self imaging starts to build. The whole point of the journey from ego to spirit is one of acceptance. If you aren't very confident or have a poor self image, the first thing you need to do is accept that. The second thing is to gradually go past your shame, past your guilt, and work your way to where you can look at yourself in the mirror and say, hey, this person is okay. We're moving up. The weakness of self image is part of your experience and programming. You are here to transcend it. It forms a pivotal part of your sacred quest. So be brave and don't be victimized by your inadequacies. They are just your teachers. They will strengthen you as you overcome them, and you will forge a new spiritual vision for yourself. To recapitulate, don't bitch about your weaknesses. Either work on them or ignore them and concentrate on your strengths instead. If you do so, usually your weakness will fall away and become less dominant in your life. There's an enormous power inside you. It is the infinite power that flows from your connection to the God force. You have the power if you will accept an infinite perception and if you start to see yourself in that way. This brings me to the next step, which is to realize that the masters who walked this planet in ancient history were masters primarily because the people who surrounded them at the time were uneducated and psychologically and metaphysically weak. And beloveds, that is chapter 7 of Stuart Weill's Infinite Self 33 Steps to Reclaiming Your Inner Power. And that is going to do it for this video because it basically says everything that it needed to say. And when it comes to self-mastery, beloveds, it comes to knowing yourself and knowing what your weaknesses are. If you have a poor self-image, if you have guilt, if you have shame, if you have anger, if you have resentment, these are aspects of yourself that you're going to need to admit, to face, to confront, to look at, to examine, and to own. Because it is only by owning them, it is only by um, admitting that you carry them, that you're able to set them down and let them go and leave them and be okay with that, no longer needing them. And as soon as I said that, what came to mind was a pacifier and a baby's bottle. You get to a point where you no longer need those things. You move on from one step to the next. But before you're ready to give it up, that pacifier and that baby's bottle is everything. You don't want no sippy cup. You throwing that sippy cup at whoever's trying to get you to take it, and you want your bottle. So, beloveds, it's all about self mastery. It's all about knowing who you are, and that something happens after the pacifier and something happens after the bottle. There's another step, and it'll come to you. It will be introduced to you, and you have to be able to be ready to take it. You have to take the sippy cup in order to get to the drinking from the cup by itself. You don't have to be in the know of what the next is. Allow. Allow wisdom. Wisdom has already created the steps. Concentrate and focus on self-mastery, and the next step will be given. It's an automatic. It's right there. Sometimes you don't need to connect all the dots. You won't see them all, but they're there. Self-mastery. Let that be self-mastery of your own conscious awareness of yourself and others and existence, period. And 2021 will be an amazing year as we begin to look through the lens of conscious awareness and where we are individually and where we are collectively, and knowing that everything is coming into alignment as it needs to. That water jug that the water bearer, the Aquarian one, is carrying is filling us with what we need. And just be conscious of emptying yourself so you'll have enough room to hold what is yours without overcrowding or spilling or not being able to get what you need because you're holding on to that old baggage space that may at one time have been very sacred to you, but now it's time to move on to the next phase. And that's what unconditional love is. That's what wisdom is. It's about changing and going with that change, going with that flow. That's where the Tao and water came in. Seek the lowest level in yourself and allow yourself to be filled by spirit, by wisdom, by existence. And don't fight the processes. And don't feel that you're failing or that you're falling apart, because you're right where you need to be. Namaste, beloveds. And again, this was Stuart Wilde. I see Stuart Little, but Stuart Wilde and Infinite Self. Enjoy the video. Happy holidays and Happy New Year, beloveds.